Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Question and Answer. I am your host, Pannobhasa Bhikkhu. So I'll just get straight to it and start reading off these questions. And the first one is from Steve, who says he has a simple question, but don't believe it because it's this huge block of a question that's actually maybe 4 or 5 questions combined. But I'll get to it. I have a simple question about meditation advice, but a kind of long, drawn-out way of asking it. I'm a very poor meditator unless I put a large amount of effort in at first to force myself to do the formal meditation. When I try to read the suttas, I often see the constant repetition, and I just think, ah, man, I don't want to go through this, just get to the point. Kind of along the lines of things that you were saying Western people probably won't have much use for. I like the traditional aspects of it. I just feel like it's difficult for me when things are not condensed because modern life trains people to move more quickly and to have such a short attention span. There's so much immediate gratification available, and if you get past that, there is so much information to absorb about every field of knowledge to try and build a picture of reality. And so when something requires studying and has what I feel extraneous information, I have trouble shaking this feeling of existential dread that I'm wasting my time or that I should just look up the Cliff Notes version. And a part of me says the feeling that I need to meditate or do any particular thing is just contributing to a constant need to be more or do more things, an obsession with doing and getting and quantifying things and achievements that is probably just generating more karma and states of desire and aversion. I notice that type of feeling a lot when doing more formal meditation, then also guilt about not being a better meditator. Part of me says these are hindrances and maybe I should discipline myself and force it more often because I'm just being avoidant. Part says that the need to do meditation is part of the problem in the first place. Have you run into anything like this, and any meditation advice or advice in general? So there's a lot to unpack here. I think just for starters, just the whole idea that the purpose of meditation is to add to, add to the whole samsaric uh, contribution of information. I think that's kind of barking up the wrong tree, kind of going the wrong direction. I'm reminded of a verse in the Tao Te Ching that says, "He who follows the way of learning increases day by day. He who follows the way of Tao decreases day by day." He becomes less and less until he arrives at non-action, and with non-action there is nothing that he cannot achieve. So meditation is like going the other direction from adding information to form a worldview, because any kind of intellectual worldview is going to be a diluted worldview. I mean, we're all deluded to some degree, but trying to understand reality by thinking about it, by adding more and more symbolic perceptions to the dumpster or the dumper or what is the hamper? That's it, the hamper. Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So the purpose of meditation is to clear your mind and reduce the number of beliefs that you got going, at least while you're meditating. Um, so yeah, the whole purpose from like the Dharmic point of view or the early Buddhist point of view is, or like a lot of Mahayana Buddhist points of view also, is I mean, you meditate in order not to be um, accumulating perceptual, concepts. So yeah, with regard to meditation, there is that. Um, if I've experienced anything like what Steve here just described, the first part of it, like the motivational aspect, yeah, I have had motivational problems with meditation. And for me, it was, I also just am by nature a bad meditator. I have like this supercharged, hyperactive mind. And let's see, it would be, I can't remember the Pali word, udacha, udacha. which is just mental agitation. So I've got like an agitated mind just by nature, it seems. And so meditation is difficult for me also. And I really have to try very hard to get into consistent, deep meditative states. And sometimes even then, no matter how hard I try, I still don't get the consistent, deep meditative states, like really deep. So if I go for a long time without getting into the really deep meditative states, like what a Christian would call contemplation, where you're just not thinking anything, then uh, yeah, I mean, you just having to go back to the ABCs, go back to the elementary techniques to try to build back up again. It can be very disheartening and frustrating. And so I don't meditate nearly as much as I used to, largely because of this motivational issue of um, just the unreliability for somebody with like a really like a hyperactive mind, like a compulsive thinker, like a lot of Westerners are. So with regard to that kind of situation, then you do well still to cultivate mindfulness, even if you're not sitting cross-legged with your eyes closed. You can still do walking meditation whenever you're walking, really. So I do that a lot. I do most of the meditation I do nowadays is walking meditation, where I'm just walking back and forth, or just walking around outside, and a lot of it is in addition to walking meditation, like essentially Hindu, just Om, just repeating Om. Like when I'm walking, a lot of the time I'll just spontaneously start Oming without really deliberately planning to start meditating. It just comes out naturally or automatically. So anybody who has they figure they don't have the time or whatever, then I mean you can meditate doing no matter what you're doing. I mean, you don't have to be sitting cross-legged with your eyes closed to be meditating. You can be brushing your teeth or driving your car or walking up and down stairs. You can be meditating while you're doing exercises. If you're doing like weightlifting or something, you can meditatively lift weights. Mindfulness of the muscle exertion and that sort of thing, the sensations that you're feeling. So, um, let's see, what else is in this question? This is a very, very complicated, simple question. Um, yeah, with regard to feeling guilt, I mean, guilt is just, yeah, you shouldn't feel guilt. I mean, even if you spent years murdering nuns and orphans, you shouldn't feel guilt over it, because that just adds to the badness. It doesn't improve the situation at all. You could say that if you have enough guilt, it will inspire you to stop doing the bad thing in future, which is fine. Although if you can just decide not to do that in future without the guilt, that's even better. Because in Buddhist philosophy, remorse or regret is kukucha, which is always an unskillful mental state and just makes more bad karma. So I'm not encouraging people to be psychopaths. Um, if you're going to feel moral scruples, you should feel them before you do the deed instead of after, because feeling them after just adds to the overall bad situation or unhappiness. So let me look through this question some more. Uh, I think that's probably good enough. But yeah, it's like the getting and doing and quantifying things and achievements is really not what meditation is supposed to be about. That you're trying to free yourself from that. That's all samsara, and ultimately the purpose of meditation is not just stress relief or making yourself feel better about yourself, but it's helping you to detach from samsara, get closer to ultimate reality, and all the quantifying and the accumulation of concepts and all that is going in the opposite direction, really. Unless you can be the philosophical type like Immanuel Kant, or somebody who or like Nagarjuna, who uses intellectuality as a way of curing yourself of intellectuality, where you just go to, you just study the limitations of your own mind until you realize that intellect just isn't going to get you there. Okay, so I'll just move on to the next question. This is from Average Dud, and I did receive a message from him saying that yes, indeed, I was correct. It's supposed to be Average Dude, except he spells it Average Dud. So let's see. The first question: does Buddhism put importance on physical fitness? Did the Buddha teach it? Do monks exercise? In Buddhism, like early Buddhism, um, there was importance placed on health, and but with regard to like exercise, like calisthenics or something, I don't even know if there was even a concept of that in ancient times. You know, I don't know if people just worked out and did exercises. Um, my experience is that if you're living a relatively simple Buddhist monk lifestyle, you're going to be walking around a lot. I mean, like the wandering monks, just the wandering is good exercise, I assume. They're living a clean life. You know, they don't have vices, or very, very few and simple and innocent vices. So that's going to be tend towards health. There is a little bit of talk about physical fitness or our health in general in the rules of monastic discipline. Like monks are encouraged to do walking meditation after they eat to help digest the food and help not to be sleepy, that kind of thing. But just living a simple lifestyle of, you know, walking to the village every morning and walking up and down hills and chop wood, carry water. Um, yeah, without doing any special exercises, I'd be relatively burly just living out in the woods. I assume living like a rough ascetic lifestyle in a forest, in my case, it seems to have brought out like caveman instincts and maybe increase my testosterone to some degree, which also would just tend to make me more muscular just without having to lift weights or anything. So some monks exercise, but you're not supposed to do it for like self-beautification. Once you're healthy, that's good enough. You know, I mean, you shouldn't be trying to get buff or anything if you're a monk. Just to be healthy and physically fit is really the whole point, because the whole purpose of having a body for a monk is just to enable you to practice Dhamma. That's the whole purpose. So once you're able to practice Dhamma, that's good enough, and you don't need to be lifting lots of weights and getting all bulked up or anything like that. And swimming, um, there's a rule against playing in water, and like I think swimming for exercise, that's sort of a borderline case. Um, you're allowed to swim if you have to, like swimming across a river because there's no other way to cross it, that sort of thing. Getting away from a herd of wild pigs or something. But uh, yeah, as a general rule, just living a simple and healthy lifestyle is good enough to keep you healthy enough. Next question. What do monks do in temples apart from meditation, eating, cleaning, etc.? Do they read text or play instruments, or are these distractions? Well, certainly a lot of monks read texts. Some um, I was advised by my teacher when I was a very junior monk that I shouldn't read a lot. But I mean, it obviously, if you want to learn what the Buddhist texts say, you're going to have to study them to some degree. And so reading is, yeah, that can go either way. With regard to playing instruments, no, it's actually against the rules of monastic discipline for a monk even to touch a musical instrument. It's one of the things that a monk is not allowed to touch. So yeah, even to just rest my hand on a drum would be a minor offense for me. So what do monks do in temples apart from? Um, well, like when I was living in Burma, sometimes I'd just sit outside and just watch the wind blow and watch the ants crawl around, that kind of thing. Just sit out there and commune with nature, or meet with visitors sometimes. And you know, you in Asia especially, you walk to the village in the morning, and then there's the whole food thing can take couple hours or more than a couple hours, especially if you have a long walk just to get to the village and back, and then eating and washing your bowl and all that. And so, what monks do in temples apart from that? Temples, it's kind of a strange word. I don't really use the word temple for a place where monks live, like a monastery. But it seems to be fairly common, especially in the Thai tradition, to call monasteries temples for some reason. Um, but yeah, a lot of chanting. The Asian monks do a lot of chanting. Next question. How much meditation do you do daily? Is the meditation of an average person comparable to a monk if the time is the same? Well, like I said above, I don't meditate nearly as much as I used to. Like my first 10 years as a monk, I would not be surprised if I was averaging like 6 hours a day, certainly more than 4 hours a day for my first 10 years or so as a monk. And yeah, eventually I just started meditating a lot less just because I wasn't really getting any deeper with it. And it was getting frustrating. And actually, I was having to try as hard as I could just to stay at the same level. It was like the Red Queen in Wonderland, where she had to run as fast as she could just to stay in the same place. It was getting to that sort of a thing. So, yeah, like I said, now I really don't do formal sitting meditation very much at all anymore. Although I still do walking meditation and still do just mindfulness of what I'm doing a lot of the time, not constantly. I mean, I think you'd have to be fully enlightened to be constantly mindful. Yeah, the Satipatthana Sutta says that if you're constantly mindful for a week, you're pretty much guaranteed of either becoming fully enlightened or becoming a non-returner. And with regard to the average meditation of the average person being comparable to a monk, it depends on the person. I mean, there are some people that just have like talent. You know, like some people have musical talent or mathematic talent or like athletic talent or whatever. Some people really just have like meditative talent. They can just sit down and they're just by nature really good meditators. I have met people like that. So somebody like that, they might not know, like how to avoid pitfalls and that sort of thing because they haven't studied as much or haven't had the same kind of teachers. But it is possible for a layperson to be a much better meditator than a monk, although on average, I would assume that the monk would be a better meditator simply because he's just drawn to being like a professional meditator. Uh, yeah. Okay. Next question. Oh, before I go on to the next question, for some reason, I have written down here, the purpose of Buddhist teaching is to liberate us from our thinking by means of our thinking. And yeah, I think I put that in the wrong place. I was putting that down as a note for something else, so I'll just move on. Number 4, you make references to physics and biological concepts in your videos as being an intellectual, an obstacle in maintaining a clear mind. Huxley talked about this being an impediment. Okay, yeah, so that's what the quote was for. I just put it in the wrong place. So being an intellectual, it can be an obstacle, especially if a person is just like a hyper intellectual where they're just hell bent on understanding reality intellectually. And Ajahn Chah used to say that scholar monks generally don't make it very far, even if they leave the school monastery and go out into the forest. They're so locked into this intellectual approach that they're just looking in the wrong direction. You're not going to understand reality. You're not going to become enlightened through intellectuality. You have to let that go. You have to detach from that. So that's why there's the Mahayana text that says the purpose of Buddha's teaching is to liberate us from our thinking by means of our thinking. So yeah, if you can be like Nagarjuna and just use your own intellect to destroy itself, just analyze your own mind to death until you just reach voidness or something, then that can work. Or if you just don't identify with your intellect, no matter how intelligent you are, if you just don't identify with that, then it's much easier to detach from it and sort of be mindful of it, and you just don't get sucked into it. But a lot of intellectual types, they just insist on trying to understand reality intellectually, and so they just reject with contempt mysticism, which is non-intellectual, because they think that's just bullshit, because they just don't get it at all. They just cannot relate to it, because they're so locked into this, everything has to make sense. And reality doesn't make sense. Enlightenment doesn't make sense. Nirvana doesn't make sense. So you just have to let sense go when you're meditating, at least detached from it. It might always be there because your mind is just going to be naturally churning out thoughts sometimes, but you can do it with detachment where you're just not identified with that. That is not you anymore. So, like being an intellectual can be helpful. I mean, it can help you to understand things. And one of the best purposes of being an intellectual is just it increases the sensitivity of your bullshit detector. You're able to see bad, weak arguments, and just dismiss them because of that. But yeah, if you get locked into it, if you're addicted to it, then it becomes like a handicap. Okay, next one. Opinion of the Eleusinian mysteries, specifically the greater mysteries. It's my understanding, I have read that nobody knows what happened in the Eleusinian mysteries because they were mysteries, they were secret. And if it was recorded, again, according to what I've read, then it didn't survive the hysterical Christian book burnings of the late Roman Empire. So yeah, I mean, I have no idea what happened in the Eleusinian mysteries other than when you got to the inner sanctum, I think you had to get there naked, and there would be like a sheaf of wheat or something um, on the altar. I mean, that's it. I really don't know. So yeah, I can't really answer that one. My opinion of the Eleusinian mysteries. Next one, opinion of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I read it a long time ago when I was like in my 20s. And it was interesting just reading about what supposedly is going to happen to you after you die. You know, that you spend some time in the bright light and you have to stay there as long as you can because it has a purifying effect. But eventually, um, the average person will experience fear of annihilation, and then they'll leave the bright light, and then you go into like a dimmer light, and then eventually you're like surrounded by all these beings, and you're supposed to keep reminding yourself that they're just figments of your imagination and so forth. So uh, it's obviously not necessarily to know this stuff in order to become enlightened, but I mean, it can be interesting. It could be useful for some people, especially um, people who are um, considering death or near death. Just the advice, I mean, it couldn't hurt. You know, maybe it'll really happen. You really will find yourself in the bright light, and just remembering, oh yeah, the book says I should stay in the bright light as long as possible. And maybe that can be helpful. But yeah, I'm not a Tibetan Buddhist, so I haven't really studied it intensively. So I'll move on to the next one, which is opinion on Aldous Huxley's description of the Dharmakaya or Buddha body trip report. And I have no idea what a Buddha body trip report is. And I don't even know what Aldous Huxley said about the Dharmakaya. I mean, he was an intelligent, sensitive person, very open-minded. He had an appreciation for mysticism. But aside from that, I really can't say. So I move on to the next one, which is opinion on Kabbalah's concept of Ein Sof and its similarity to Sunyata. Oh boy, Kabbalah. I I know almost nothing about Kabbalah. Almost everything I've read about Kabbalah, I read in Karen Armstrong's book, A History of God, and it just seemed like gobbledygook. It's like I'd have no use for it. It's supposedly a mystical tradition, but it's got so much jargon and all these symbols and like the tree of Sephiroth and all this stuff that yeah, I mean it seems like a really shoddy kind of mysticism because it's so just littered, just so overburdened with all these concepts and this jargon and everything that yeah, it's really not my style. So I really don't have much of an opinion on that other than I got no use for it. So then below this, average dad, average dude says, not a question, a request. You should do voiceover of text on the channel would be great. Yeah, I've considered that, and you're not the first person to suggest that. Um, and yeah, I'd be willing to read text, although there's different ways that I could do it. I mean, I could just do it like this, where I'm just sitting here reading, or I could just have like a picture on the screen, you know, that doesn't change, which wouldn't be much fun to look at. Although maybe most people would just be listening to it while they're driving their car or something. Or I could try to get fancy and do like a photo montage or something. But that would be more work for me. But the easiest for me would just be I'd just be sitting here reading the text. But I don't know if people would be into that. But yeah, I have considered that, and I probably will start doing it before much longer. Just reading some of my favorite texts, um, just so that it's on audio and people can listen to it because they're too busy or whatever to sit down and read. And also, of course, I'll just be picking my favorites, so it may be sort of a higher quality of texts than most people would read if they were just sitting down and reading at random without knowing what to read. Okay, next question from Chaplin. With April 26th, 2021 being your 30th anniversary since your ordination as a monk, do you plan on doing anything to mark the occasion? I wasn't planning on doing anything. That is my 30th anniversary. Going with the Western calendar will be April 26th. I will be a monk for 30 years on that day. And I wasn't planning on doing anything. It's just I forget my own birthday sometimes. It's just all days are pretty much the same. And there have been times I've been just looking at the calendar trying to figure out what day it is. And it's like, oh, yesterday was my birthday. Oh well. Every day is Buddha Day. That's the way I look at it. So yeah, the 30th anniversary of my ordination as a monk. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but I'm not planning on doing anything special except I recently told our good friend Brian Rue that at the beginning of one of our shows that it was going to be my anniversary that day, and he looked up in the calendar, and it turns out we're going to be doing a show on that day. So there probably will be like the special 30th anniversary show on the Brian Rue show, and that's going to be about it. Also, Chaplin asks, where can we send you a token of our gratitude via snail mail while you are still in California? Okay, yeah, I'll be in California for at least 2 more months. And if I remember, I might even include the address down below, below like the URL links. You might have to click on the See More button. But just in case, my address here is Pannobhasa Bhikkhu at Kusalakari Meditation Center, or just KMC. That's easy. 9698 South Priest Road, French Camp, California, 95231. That would be my snail mail address for at least 2 more months. Okay, next question by Chaplin is, would you consider doing more weekly videos with basic Dharma talks on certain subjects, or maybe incorporating small meditations or chanting? I know you don't like talking through guided meditations. Yeah, I'm fine with doing weekly videos on basic Dharma talks on certain subjects. That's fine with me. Yeah, it's sort of like supply and demand. If I have the demand for something, I can supply it, so long as it's within my realm of expertise or experience. But with regard to incorporating small meditations, the only meditation I could really do would be a guided meditation. And I don't like guided meditations, either giving or receiving, because I just have this aversion for somebody invading my mind and telling me what to think. And besides, when I meditate, I don't want to think anything. It's like I'm a minimalist when I meditate. I prefer like just as much emptiness and silence when I meditate as possible. So yeah, I wouldn't be doing guided meditations, and I don't think anybody would be interested in just watching me sit here with my eyes closed, watching me breathing slowly. So yeah, probably no guided meditations. And chanting also, I can do a little chanting. I used to know a lot of chanting, and then I just I'm not as into chanting as like Asian monks are. Asian monks, they can chant the same thing for 2 hours every day. They'll be chanting Abhidhamma or something, chanting all of the paritas. And I used to know all of the paritas, all the like the main 11 ones, and like the Bhikkhu Patimokkha and all that. But just through non-chanting, you forget, and it just gets kind of boring after a while, just chanting the same thing over and over again. The Asians, they don't get as bored with that as easily as Westerners do. So, and also just if I'm chanting just so that people can see me chanting and nobody even understands the Pali that I'm chanting, then in a way it's just sort of like a performance. I'm like a performance artist, like the dancing monkey or something. So yeah, I probably won't be doing a lot of chanting. So, but I can do talks. I mean, I'm pretty good at talking, relatively coherent on that. So um, yeah, so I would consider the weekly videos on basic Dharma talks and so forth. Okay, next question from Dog Breath, Mr. Breath. What is your opinion of Abhidhamma? Ooh. I came across an online course by Bhikkhu Bodhi about meditation in the Abhidhamma. Do you consider the Abhidhamma has anything of value to say about meditation? If so, what? Oh, Abhidhamma. I mean, I have a lot of Western monks just despise Abhidhamma. I have to admit, it's the third Pitaka, but way more than half of Western monks just dismiss it as not authentic teachings of Gautama Buddha. It's like an old commentarial system where they're trying to systematize and intellectualize everything. They're trying to, it's almost like Aristotle's physics or something, where you just try to just fit everything into this interlocking system, including nirvana. I mean, nirvana is like off the scale, nibbana in Pali, but still they've got that as one of the four ultimate realities, and it's no more real than like nose sensitivity or femininity or earth element or something. It's just kind of ridiculous. So like Jnanavira used to say, who was a very famous monk who lived in the 50s and first half of the 60s in Sri Lanka. He said, the less Abhidhamma you know, the better, because the less you have to unlearn in order to understand the truth. So I'm not saying that Abhidhamma is completely false, but I do think that a lot of it is just made up. It's just attempts at explaining reality by scholar monks who maybe didn't even meditate very much. It's just like a hyper intellectual system of trying to understand Dhamma. And yeah, I used to be much more down on it, because in Burma it's considered to be the most important aspect of Buddhism. It's supposed to be the highest teachings of Buddha is Abhidhamma, and I've just never been able to take it very seriously. Most Westerners can't, because like I've said before, I'm kind of mystical by nature. I appreciate silence and stillness. It's like that's how you understand reality. You're not going to understand reality by thinking about it. So you're not going to understand reality by studying Abhidhamma. You're going to understand reality by seeing through the the illusion. And when you're thinking a lot, you're just adding more to the illusion. So you try to get things still and quiet and peaceful and simple. And Abhidhamma certainly is not simple. It's just extraordinarily complex. And Bhikkhu Bodhi is talking about meditation in Abhidhamma. Well, Bhikkhu Bodhi doesn't meditate either. He's never been much of a meditator, and most of these Abhidhamma scholars, yeah, they're not meditators either. They just specialize in the dogma. And yeah, I mean, I used to come up with like joke insults. Your mother was an Abhidhamma scholar, and your father smelled of elderberries. Or stub my toes. Oh, hurts like an Abhidhamma scholar. So yeah, you just if you want to know more about meditation, go to a meditation master, and if he's got stuff to say about Abhidhamma, like the Burmese meditation masters will talk about Abhidhamma sometimes, but even most of what is taught as Abhidhamma isn't even from the Abhidhamma Pitaka. It's just commentarial, because by the time the Tipitaka was settled, Abhidhamma still wasn't finished yet. So some of the basic teachings of Abhidhamma, like the Chitta Vritti, the 17 mind moments in order that have to occur in order to have a complete thought, that's not even in the Abhidhamma Pitaka. Or Bhavanga Chitta, which is like the subconscious substratum of mind and all that. Or the Rupa Kalapas, the little atomic structures from which all matter are made. That stuff just isn't discussed much, if at all, in the actual Abhidhamma Pitaka. It just kept developing, and a lot of the most important stuff developed after the Tipitaka was closed and no more texts were being added to it. So Yeah, I've written some in the old Nipa Pancha blog. I wrote at least 3 posts that were criticizing, kind of borderline bashing Abhidhamma. That if you're interested, maybe you could look those up. So, next question. Does Pannobhasa mean anything when translated? And yes, indeed, it does. It's a combination of 2 words, panya and obasa. Panya usually means, it's usually translated as wisdom, but I like Nyanamoli's rendering of understanding. And obasa means shine, so I'm Mr. Understanding Shine. If you wanted to get even more technical, like panya is, it's like the prefix pa plus nya. And so it has exactly the same Indo-European etymology as the Greek word prognosis, or the English word foreknow, like in foreknowledge. But it doesn't mean seeing the future. It just means like the pa, which means forwards. Like in Sanskrit, it's pra. In Greek, it's pro, which is a prefix meaning, moving forwards. Here it just means like advanced. It's like a more advanced understanding, which is like, higher wisdom or something. And the obasa, the O is like a prefix indicating downwardsness, like the sun shines down. So I'm Mr. Foreknowledge Downshine, if you wanted to get real technical. But yeah, it's like, the light of wisdom or something like that. I didn't name myself. If I had named myself, I would have named myself something different. It's just when you get ordained, your preceptor gets to pick what your Pali name will be. And one reason why I'm named Pannobhasa is I was born on Thursday, and if you're a Burmese monk or a monk ordained in a Burmese tradition, generally, if you're born on a Thursday, then your name starts with P, B, or M. And so Pannobhasa was just a convenient one that came up, so they just stuck it on me. Okay, next question. Oh, this is a strange one. I read on the Amida International Temple website that chanting of the name, chanting the primal vow, could be traced back to the Pali Canon. Is there any truth to this? Was Amitabha even referenced in the Pali Canon? And then later, he added this large block of info that I won't read the whole thing, but he's sort of quoting what Shinran Shonin says about how Amida Buddha is mentioned in the ancient Pali texts, and how in one part he was a monk named Dharmakara, but in another part of this block of info, he was just not a historical figure, but was just kind of a transcendental Buddha or something. So just getting to the question of whether like the primal vow of Amida Buddha is referenced in the Pali Canon, then as far as I can tell, no. I mean, Amida himself is not mentioned unless he's going by some other name. And who knows? I mean, it could be that the Buddha says, like previous enlightened beings of the past, and then like these Pure Land Buddhists would say, "Aha, there you see, he's referring to Amida Buddha there." It could be something like that, but yeah, the whole Pure Land thing is practically the opposite of what is taught in the oldest text. Like the whole Bodhisattva concept is essentially the opposite of what the Buddha was teaching in the oldest texts, because the Buddha was teaching. I mean, according to the very ancient texts, if you're able to become enlightened, get enlightened as soon as you can. Just get enlightened in this very life. If you can do it now, do it now. So the whole idea of putting off enlightenment indefinitely until all other beings are saved, which is essentially putting off enlightenment forever, because all sentient beings just are not going to be saved. There's always going to be an infinite number of them. There's always going to be just infinite misery in the universe. So putting off enlightenment, yeah, I don't think the Buddha taught that. And I don't think you're going to find Amida Buddha in the ancient texts. I mean, I've read almost all of it, and I don't remember Amida Buddha anywhere in there, and I'd be very surprised. And there's certainly no mention of like praying to get reborn in the Pure Land. Excuse me. Okay, next question. It seems to me that no one knows what we are caught up in, and therefore no one knows what to do about it. That is, no one has an answer or antidote. On this basis, all religions and philosophies are false. On what basis does a Buddhist believe Siddhartha Gautama Buddha did know what we are caught up in? Well, I do not accept the premise that nobody knows what we're caught up in and nobody knows what to do about it, and that there is no answer or antidote. Yeah, I mean, we'd just be screwed if that were the case. Um, yeah, I think it's fairly clear that we're caught up in beliefs. Really, I mean, it's like perception is samsara. We're stuck in perceptions. We're stuck in the symbolic interpretation of reality instead of just dealing with reality without the symbols, just dealing with it directly. But most of us are stuck in symbols, like mental symbols that are just generated psychologically. And we think that's reality. You know, we're stuck in Plato's cave, we're stuck in the Matrix or whatever. So, let's see, on what basis does a Buddhist believe Siddhartha Gautama did know what we are caught up in? Well, the very convenient working hypothesis is that he was an enlightened being, that he saw through the illusion into ultimate reality because he had freed his mind of his own thinking, or of just being like identified with it. So, yeah, I mean, there's no way to prove that he was enlightened. There's no way to prove anybody was enlightened, but it does ring true to a lot of people. You know, this intuitively, it just feels right and it makes sense. And even though reality doesn't make sense, I mean, the idea that unenlightenment is caused by um, just clinging to illusions, essentially, clinging to like symbolic interpretations of reality instead of just experiencing reality directly without the symbols. So, yeah, I guess on what basis does a Buddhist believe? It would have to be faith because there's no way to prove it. You can't prove it intellectually or empirically. In fact, empirically, enlightenment may make no sense whatsoever. It's like a paradox. It's just off the scale. Like nirvana is just off the phenomenal scale. It's not. It's nowhere on the 31 planes of existence. You know, everything in samsara is supposedly in one of these 31 planes of existence. You know, everything in phenomenal reality, quote unquote, is in these 31 planes of existence, and nirvana just is not on that scheme. You know, it's just completely other. You know, it's just beyond. So, yeah, just going with samsaric, empiricism. I mean, you just can't prove it, and so there's just going to have to be like this intuitive faith, or worse than that would be dogmatic faith. But even having the open door there, even if it proves to be futile, I mean, it's better than just having the closed and locked door, and it's all just materialism, and it's we're just stuck. There is no escape from Plato's cave. You're better off trying, I think, than just giving up. So next question, what do you miss about Burma and what do you miss most? What I miss most, I think, is the little wall geckos. I really like those little guys. They're these little lizards about the size of a finger, and they change colors and they chirp like sparrows, and they crawl around on the walls. They can go right across a ceiling or up a plate glass window, and they eat bugs, which is nice. And they're just kind of fun to watch, and they're kind of cool looking. So yeah, that's what I miss most about Burma is the little wall geckos. Other things I miss about Burma, well, I mean, you're more in nature in Burma than I am right here. And then, I mean, when I was living in Burma, mostly I was living in caves and no electricity and no running water, and you always know, what stars are in the sky and what phase the moon is in, and you're really like in tune with the weather. You're in tune with the cycles of the seasons and the trees and everything, which is nice. I like that. Um, I kind of miss just you know Burmese villagers. They're just very simple-hearted. very open, generous, very good people. So that's nice too. Although there's, I mean, mostly I'm dealing with Burmese people here too, but the culture in America is somewhat different. So, I mean, every country has its good points and its bad points. Every culture does. So, um, yeah, there are things that I kind of miss. I mean, I don't really miss it badly. You know, there's things that I think are nice. It's not like I really miss them. It's just that I think that, you know, there are nice things about living in Burma. And like I said, one of the nicest things is the little geckos. Okay, next question. Is karma the result of our previous actions? If karma, oh, is karma the result of our previous actions, whether good or bad, whether freely willed or not? Please define karma. This kind of question keeps coming up. I have to explain karma a lot. But from the Buddhist point of view, karma is cetana. So karma is will. You know, like Schopenhauer's will. You know, the world as will and representation. Karma would fit the definition of will pretty well, like Schopenhauer's will. So if you know anything about Schopenhauer's philosophy, you could interpret karma that way, I suppose. Um, see, is karma the result of our previous actions, whether good or bad? Karma is like the momentum of your mental states. It's just like the psychic momentum of your mind, and so it's in a way it's like habitual. So if you do anything, it sort of it influences the stream of momentum of your mind. You know, you like you're it's hard to explain. It's very difficult to explain. But essentially, that's what karma is. It's just the momentum of your mind. It's like will. And there's all these implications of it that I think I'll spare everybody. I won't get into it. But the next question is about karma also, so I'll just move on to that. Next question by Mr. Breath. In one video, if I understand correctly, you said karma was an impersonal force. If it's an impersonal force, why, how is it a moral one based on good or bad actions? What I mean is, if my karma is the result of previous good or bad actions, whether freely willed or not, and karma is an impersonal force, how is it karma appears to operate in a moral manner, as in being based on good or bad? That is, the odds must be stacked very high against an impersonal force acting in such a moral manner, and one which is entirely consistent with almost all other human-made religions. Again, I mean, I've explained this more than once, and first of all, there seems to be an implication here that good and bad are some sort of metaphysical realities in and of themselves, whereas in Buddhism, Buddhist ethics is simply based on whatever makes your mind clearer is good, and whatever makes your mind less clear is bad. Whatever gets you closer to enlightenment is good. Whatever gets you farther away from it is bad. It's sort of like an Epicurean, you know, saying whatever increases happiness or pleasure is good. Whatever decreases happiness or pleasure is bad. So there's nothing necessarily metaphysical about it at all. If it makes your mind clearer, causes you to have fewer desires and attachments and all that, makes you more content, that's good. And you know, there's not necessarily any kind of you know, godly, divine, supernatural element to it at all. It's just if it gets you closer to enlightenment, or closer to peace of mind, then it's good. And it's just it's based on human psychology. I mean, you kill your own mother. I mean, it's going to mess your mind all up. So that's why it's bad. You know, it's not any kind of action. It's just the effect on your own mental states. Like Buddhism is, like ethics are purely psychological. Anything that causes you to have greater peace of mind and fewer desires and all that, that's going to be good, regardless of what the action is. So let's see. Oh, I got to read this again. You said karma is an impersonal force. Yeah, I mean, if there's no self in Buddhism, then everything's an impersonal force ultimately. And like in Schopenhauer's philosophy, will is an impersonal force, and it just sort of takes personal forms, but it's the same sort of force, regardless of what form it takes. You know, the form is something else. That's the representation. Or in Buddhism, it would be like the perception, you know, the mental states. Let's see. I think that's it. I think I answered that one. Okay, so I move on to the next one, and the next few questions are from Potila. Not pointless Potila, but a different one. Let's see. First question from Potila. Regarding monastics in the West, do you think it is possible to consciously develop a new or revised Vinaya that would work better in this setting? You mentioned handling money and obtaining food are some of the largest obstacles. It seems that the models of Christian monastic, Catholic, Orthodox are a better fit for this culture. For example, some farming, production of goods like candles, books, etc. Yes, it would reduce the amount of time for formal practice, but it seems to be a more viable structure that would permit the existence of monasticism at all. Would it be an entirely new order of monastics, or could the Vinaya be augmented for living a different life, or of renunciant life? If not, it seems that some of these rules are already moot. Monks handing money, cooking for themselves, etc. So why can some be set aside and others cannot? Actually, none of them can be set aside. I mean, the rules are just set down. They're supposedly set down by the Buddha. The only thing that could change Vinaya rules would be a great council, and Asian monks that participate in great councils are too conservative to change anything. And so the rules aren't going to be changed. You cannot legally, validly change the rules of monastic discipline. Nobody has the authority, not even the Thai Sangha Raja has the authority to change even the most minor rules. So he can say it's okay for monks in the West to wear sweaters, but so what? I don't care if he says it's okay. The rules says that you can't, and so yeah, you're not going to be able to revise the rules of monastic discipline. So you're either going to have a few, like a handful of just super strict monks that no matter how difficult it is, no matter how inconvenient it is for themselves and everybody around them, they're going to follow the rules strictly. They're not going to handle money at all. They're not even going to consent to other people handling it for them because that's against the rules too. They're not going to eat any food that isn't properly offered by someone who isn't a monk. And they're just going to wear 3 robes, and if it gets really cold, they can use like a wool felt blanket, which is allowable. But there's not going to be very many of those. And so your other 2 choices are you're going to have sloppy monks that don't follow the rules very strictly, and that's almost everybody, including monks that have a reputation for being very strict. The ones that are wearing like the karate pajamas and stuff, or eating cheese in the afternoon, or that kind of thing, um, or just consenting to people handling money on their behalf, that kind of thing. Or you're just going to have to come up with some new system that won't be fully ordained bhikkhus. And I don't see any reason why you can't have all three. You can have that handful, that little nucleus of super strict monks, and you can also have monks of varying degrees of strictness. That some of them are they just consider it okay not to follow the rules completely strictly, because some rules frankly are just obsolete. There are rules that are just the rules were developed in ancient India 2,500 years ago, and some of them are just really obsolete in Western culture. And so there's different ideas about how to deal with that. I mean, it's like you can just deliberately break the rules and think it's okay because the rules are obsolete, or you can be the other way and say you shouldn't break the rules. And so if you don't want to follow the rules, or it's just not convenient to follow the rules, you should either move somewhere where you can follow the rules, like it's like Buddhist Asia, or you don't be a fully ordained monk. And I kind of, I can accept that. I mean, it's like nobody is forced to become a monk. And so it just seems like it's like the rules of a game. If you don't want to follow the rules, then it's better just not to play the game than to sit there cheating. But I mean, that's just my own interpretation, and other people will have different interpretations. And so, like it takes all kinds. But I think in order for monasticism really to take off, become anywhere near to mainstream in America, like Buddhist monasticism or anything resembling Buddhist monasticism, there's going to have to be some new unofficial system that isn't fully ordained monks. And like Mahayana monks, um, from the Theravadan point of view, they're not really monks because they don't get ordained in accordance with the official ordination procedure. So their ordination would be invalid just based on that. And yeah, it was a similar situation in China. It's like in China, wandering beggars did not have nearly the amount of respect that they have in India. In India, you have the wandering holy man who begs for his food, and that's they are revered. But pretty much everywhere else in the world, they're just beggars. They're like beneath contempt or something. And so Chinese monks had to just become farmers, and it's literally against the rules for a Theravadan bhikkhu to be a farmer. I mean, a monk is not allowed to dig the ground. He's not allowed even to damage green plants, which pretty much rules out any kind of farming. So, yeah, that's just the standard complication that I've been wrangling with, and yeah, I think there's just going to be a combination of all the three options that I mentioned, and I think some kind of compromise movement where just the spirit is retained, but the official ordination, along with the ancient Indian rules that are kind of hindrances in the West or handicaps, yeah, those would be set aside. Although, I mean, the monks would not consider themselves to be fully ordained bhikkhus, and that would be good for the nuns too, because then you wouldn't have the ridiculous situation we've got now of women wanting to be ordained as fully ordained bhikkhunis, and then just rejecting the rules because the rules are like prejudice against women. So they want to become bhikkhunis partly due to the politically correct notion of gender equality, and then immediately they just don't follow the rules because the rules are biased against women. So with like a new system or a new order that isn't bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, then you can just set up rules that fit Western culture, and like the nuns and the monks can be equals, and everything's dandy. Next question. In comparative religion, can you speak about the decline of Christianity in the West and how that has shaped the entry of Buddhism into the culture? As the West lacks an overall agreed upon narrative culture, there are now so many competing ideas and even religions. Do you think the decline of Christianity is a good thing, or does it do more harm than good? Do you think the entry of Buddhism into Western culture is just another aspect of multiculturalism, Inc., which is destabilizing the West? That's a good question. I mean, in a way, Buddhism becoming more popular in the West is a result of like multiculturalism and the decline of Christianity. Um, and so who knows? Maybe it's like the Frankfurt School may have considered promoting Buddhism and other non-Christian religions to be part of their master plan or something. But it's not all bad. I mean, obviously, I'm a Buddhist. I like Buddhism, and I kind of I do regret in a way, not in the kukucha unskillful regret. Maybe it is, but yeah. I mean, Western civilization, it just became like a religious monoculture. Everybody's worshiping the deified Hebrew carpenter, and just just all the other spiritual systems in the West became extinct just through the just like the hysterical intolerance of this kind of attitude that took over, which is trying to take over again in a different form. But I mean, you don't have to have a religious monoculture. Like in the Buddhist time, you had a number of different spiritual systems, and like even before Christianity took over in the West, like in the Roman Empire, you had a variety of different religions and different people worshiping different gods, and you had like the philosophers that didn't have much use for gods at all, and they were all getting along. And in a way, it was more vibrant, and it was more stimulating. You had like different religions competing with each other. When you've got like a monoculture, like a monopoly, you have the problems that monopolies have, where you just get corruption. You get a crappy product that's overpriced because you only have one to pick from. You only have one producer to choose from. So having different systems competing with each other, that's good capitalism, and it's intellectual capitalism, spiritual capitalism, but you wind up with a better product at a better price. So yeah, it goes both ways. I mean, it could be that the cultural Marxists or whoever were promoting other religions than Christianity to weaken Western civilization, but it doesn't necessarily have to weaken civilization because like ancient India or ancient Rome, you could have like a multi-religious system, like a culture, and so long as there is some bedrock, some substratum of agreement, like in Buddha or like in India, most of the spiritual systems agreed on certain things. There is samsara, there is like a higher goal, there's karma and that kind of thing. And in ancient Rome, I assume there was a lot of agreement on a lot of things too. Um, it may just be that the agreement is of more secular nature in the West because Western people just tend to be more secular for whatever reasons. We don't need to get into that. So let's see. I'm see if I'm answering the question here. Okay, yeah, I think I answered that one uh, well enough to satisfy myself anyhow. Next question from Potila. Can you speak about the definitions of Dhamma as found in the text and in Indian culture of the Buddhist time? The term Dhamma is used in many contexts and seems to mean multiple things in the same text. Would one definition of Dhamma be similar to the Western idea of natural law, in that it is an impersonal concept, yet has features which one must follow to maintain harmony? In following the natural law Dhamma, one comes closer to seeing the truth because it is the truth. Yeah, Dhamma or Dharma in Sanskrit, or English now, I suppose. Um, yeah, it's one of the vaguest words in the Pali language. It's got all kinds of definitions. Like originally, it's based on the verb dare di, which means to bear, to hold up. And one of the earliest pre-Buddhist definitions of Dhamma or Dharma was law. Like even now in Burma, like the word for Dharma is teya, and teyathiji is a judge. It's like the teya yon is like the courthouse. So it can still mean law. It's like this. That's like one of the earliest definitions of it, because law is kind of what holds up society. You have to have order to hold up society. And in Buddhism, it can also mean philosophy. It can mean the Buddha's teachings. It can mean like a mental state, like especially in the commentaries and in Abhidhamma, a Dhamma is like a mental state. Or let's see, it can just mean anything real, like in Abhidhamma again. Um, well, actually, Dhamma, it doesn't necessarily mean mental state just in Abhidhamma. In the sutras also, sometimes Dhammas are mental states. But like in Abhidhamma in particular, it means anything that's ultimately real. Like a Dhamma is, it's based on to bear, to hold up. And so presumably a Dhamma is what holds up the manifestations or the appearances or like the qualities. You have the essence that has qualities to it. The qualities are perceptible, but the essence underlies that. And that's also another meaning of Dhamma. And I'm sure there's lots of other ones that I can't think of. But with regard to natural law, there's another word in Pali, and unfortunately, I don't remember what it is. It's a two-syllable word that just means like natural law, like in the Vedas, you have Varuna, who's like the god of natural law. Might be kind of similar to Poseidon in like classical polytheism, where yeah, it's like really impersonal. Whereas Dharma is more, I mean, like the other word, the natural law, the word that I can't think of, that would include things like gravity and like space and time and that sort of thing. Whereas Dharma can include that because it can include anything. I mean, it can just mean thing, like Sabe Dhamma Anatta, just everything is without self, you know. So I think I just lost the thread. Let's see. Would one definition of Dhamma be similar to the Western idea of natural law? Yeah, Dhamma is more of a spiritual law, or like a philosophical law. So it's more ethical, more spiritual and ethical. Um, okay, so I think I answered that one. I hope I answered it. And my lighting is acting weird because when it's bright outside, I'm backlit, and then it doesn't show me very well. And then so I turn the lights up all the way bright, and now it's dark and overcast and raining outside. Next question from Potila. Another question related to ancient India and early Buddhism. What was the view of different nations, ethnicities, and racial or caste groups in the suttas and early Buddhism? The Ashokan pillars and the Buddha himself mentioned the Greeks, so there was an idea of foreign peoples living outside the Indian cultural sphere at this time. The texts clearly talk about differing capabilities between peoples, men versus women, moral versus immoral, etc. So how does karma account for how large groups of people come together and exist with a shared language and culture? Do they share some foundational karma, or are people from a group reborn into a group due to their attachment to those people? Are all human births said to be equally capable of attaining awakening, or is this a modern interpretation? Some texts indicate that those who are disabled, for example, may lack the capacity to learn Dhamma. How would language, IQ, culture, etc. play into this? And is it possible for one to really escape the karma of their ethnic kinship? And I think this is about 5 questions all combined. So let's see, starting with what was the view of different nations, ethnicities, and racial or caste groups in the suttas in early Buddhism? Buddhism, the Buddha himself didn't have much use for any kind of racial or caste differences. It was like once a monk was ordained, he left behind all um, like class or caste, or to some degree race, and everyone just became monks. They became sons of the Buddha. So yeah, there was that. Um, at the same time, Buddhism was probably relatively elitist, where it was mostly men of the upper classes, or at least from Vaishyas on up, that were becoming monks. There probably weren't a whole lot of like outcasts and like Shudras, or you know proto-Australoid hill people that were becoming monks. It does seem to have been largely an upper class, um, sort of a for like the intelligentsia. I mean, it was Buddhism is to some degree like an intellectual system, even though you're trying to go beyond the intellect. Still, it has an appeal to philosophically minded people, and that's going to be more people of the upper classes, just naturally, even without filtering out um, filtering out like the lower classes. It's kind of the same way in the West. Um, just because most of the people who became Buddhist monks were like Brahmins and Kshatriyas, doesn't mean that it was a racist system or a classist system. It was just that people of the lower classes just weren't as interested in that sort of thing. So that's one question. Let's see. Uh, the Ashokan pillars and the Buddha himself mentioned the Greeks, so there was an idea of foreign peoples living outside Indian cultural sphere at this time. Um, yeah, that's true. There wasn't a whole lot of idea of non-Indian culture, though. I mean, you had some barbarians that weren't really understood very well. They were just like invading marauders that would show up sometimes. But India had this idea of the 4 continents, and the subcontinent of India was, Jambu Dipa, which was the southern continent, inhabited by humans, and the other continents were inhabited by non-human beings. So they really didn't have a very good idea of like world geography at the time. Um, let's see. Next question here in this paragraph. Um, how does karma account for how large groups of people come together and exist with a shared language and culture? Is similarity of karma. Do they share some foundational karma, or are people from a group reborn into a group due to their attachment to those people? Um, yeah, I mean, if you're born into everyone born into the same culture, they're going to have similar beliefs, and so they're going to have similar karma, because karma is a mental state. So yeah, there's I have even read that some cultures, even though there's not group karma, karma is sort of individual, but still there are certain cultures that sort of reincarnate, like Rome reincarnated as America in a way, to some degree anyway, just because people with similar, uh, similar attitudes are going to, um, they're going to fit together better than if you just got radically different attitudes. And so, after one civilization dies, then the people with these attitudes are going to have to be reborn into a different civilization, which will then kind of perpetuate a lot of the attitudes from the earlier civilization, just through the karmic effect. Let's see here. But also, I mean, attachment to certain people. Certain individuals can be reincarnated and interacting with each other over and over again, or so I have read. Like, I supposedly am my own grandfather. According to my father, he was firmly persuaded that I was a reincarnation of his own father, which makes me my own grandpa. Um, are all human births said to be equally capable of attaining awakening, or is this a modern interpretation? No, I mean, not all human births are equally capable of attaining awakening. Like, if you're born like a deaf mute, then obviously that's going to be a severe handicap. Or if you're born into a culture that just has no Dhamma, no concept of that, then that's going to be a severe handicap. Just even though you're healthy and everything, your mind works fine, you just are not exposed to that. So yeah, there's definitely inequality. It's like inequality is just built into Dhamma, and it's based on ourselves. I mean, we create the inequality just because people's karma is not equal. Some people have different kinds of karma. It's just some people's karma that they're going to live. They're almost up to the deva level, so they're going to be living like a really nice, beautiful kind of a life. Other people are almost down to the hell realms, even though they're born in as a human into a human body. But yeah, there's just lots and lots of difference, and so different people have different what are called paramis. Just your karma is more or less developed, and so yeah, not everybody has an equal possibility. Although the possibility is there, I think everybody has what in Zen would be called the Buddha nature, where there's like at least this little glimmer of enlightenment down in the center of our heart somewhere. It's always there. I mean, you can't be completely devoid of any um, awareness, unless maybe you're like a vampire, a soulless vampire, or maybe just an absolute sociopath with no compassion whatsoever, no sensitivity of that sort, no conscience. Maybe, but it seems to me like anybody would have to have at least this little spark of enlightenment down in there somewhere. Okay, let's see what else. How would language, IQ, culture, etc., play into this? And is it possible for one to really escape the karma and their ethnic kinship? Well, it's not a matter of escaping karma. Like even the Buddha, he still had past karma. An enlightened being supposedly still has past karma influencing their life. They're just not making any new karma. So you don't really escape from it. You just detach from it, and that's like something that a lot of people don't really understand. They're trying to escape from this or escape from that or eradicate or something, when really I mean, that's just nature taking its course. You just stop identifying with it. You just detach from it and just continue letting nature take its course, because it's not really you anyway. Oh, I think I may have answered all of this, possibly. If I haven't, you can ask it again if there's some part that I missed. Okay, well, last question, very last on the list, is from Zach. And Zach asks, have you ever read the Lotus Sutra? If so, what do you think of it? If not, I'm guessing you've heard of the Mahayana concept of upaya, or useful means. What is your opinion on this concept in spiritual practice? Okay, so this is like two questions. One is, have I ever read the Lotus Sutra? And yeah, I did. Like when I was in my early 20s, like I was in college, I read the Lotus Sutra, and I don't remember it very well. I remember there was like the simile that's also found in the Pali text of the building on fire, that this world is on fire, and you know, you got like the Buddhas and the Pratyeka Buddhas and the, what, I can't remember the other group, maybe it was Bodhisattvas or something, using different ways of luring children out of the burning building as a kind of skillful means. So yeah, the Lotus Sutra, if I remember correctly, you know, it was like a relatively early Mahayana sutra, and so it's got a lot in common with Theravada, or just primitive Buddhism. You know, there's a lot that is similar, and aside from like the Bodhisattva concept, and also, if I remember correctly, it was going, Mahayana Buddhist texts were going through a phase where you would have like the magic mantra at the end. So, like, what is it? Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhi, svaha. I don't think that was to the Lotus Sutra though. But, so yeah, I've read it, and it's a relatively wise, profound sutra, as sutras go. Let's see, what do I think of it? I think I just answered that one. Let's see. I've heard of the Mahayana concept of upaya, or useful means. What is my opinion on this concept in spiritual practice? Well, it is mentioned in even like the Atthaka Vagga, which is a very ancient text, and it's in that saying that a monk should just avoid all upaya, but it's not talking about teaching gimmicks. It's just talking about anything that you rely on, because upaya means like something that you fall back on or rely on. And so the early Buddhist texts were saying, with regard to like your own mind, your own beliefs, you should not depend on anything. But I think that's different from, you know, skillful means, where like in teaching, I think you have to use skillful means, because, you know, the goal is a paradox. Enlightenment itself is just off the scale. Nirvana is off the scale. So yeah, you're going to have to do whatever it takes, really, to help somebody, if you know how, if you can. And so that can result in, you know, weird riddles, or just confusing people, or just blowing their minds, or whatever it takes. You know, it's like some of the Hindu swamis, you know, they do miracles just to get people interested, and then once they got interested, then they could teach them more easily. So there's that kind of thing too. So I'm not opposed to skillful means in teaching. So yeah, that's the question. So I think I answered it, and so that's it. So if you have any more questions, you know, feel free to ask, and I'll just keep doing this as long as people keep asking questions. And I hope you can hear me, because now it's raining hard outside. So yeah, if you have questions to ask, just include them in the comments below the video, or every once in a while, like right before, like maybe a week or less before I do one of these, I'll just put an announcement on my Subscribe Star channel. So if you're subscribed to that, and it doesn't cost anything, you can see the announcements there too. And so until next time, be happy, and I think we're done.